You think your dog sees you as human, but that's not what it believes. Most people assume their dog understands them the way another person would, like there's this shared awareness, this emotional mirror. But that belief hides something deeper, something quietly shaping every interaction you have. Because your dog isn't looking at you and thinking, human. That category doesn't exist in its mind the way it does in yours. What it sees is something more instinctive, more functional. You've probably felt it without noticing. The way your dog watches you move, not casually, but with this quiet focus, like it's tracking meaning behind every step, every shift in your body. It's not just attention, it's interpretation. Your dog isn't hearing your words first. It's reading your energy, your posture, your tone, and somehow it reacts before you even fully express yourself. That feeling you get, like your dog just knows, it's real, but not in the way people usually think. It's not emotional intelligence in a human sense. It's something more primal. Dogs evolved to survive by reading patterns, not identities. So instead of labeling you as a human, they categorize you based on behavior, consistency, and emotional signals that repeat over time. To your dog, you are not a species. You are a role, a presence, a predictable force in its environment that either makes sense or doesn't. And that's why your dog doesn't care about things you think define you. Your achievements, your appearance, your social identity, none of that exists in its world. It only knows how you show up. You've seen this before, haven't you? When you're calm, your dog relaxes. When you're tense, it shifts. It's subtle, but it's constant, like it's syncing itself to you. And it is. Dogs are wired to regulate themselves based on the energy of what they trust. And if you're the center of their world, then your state becomes their reference point. That's why inconsistency affects them so deeply. One moment you're relaxed, the next you're unpredictable. To you, it's just emotion. To them, it's like the environment changing without warning. And in a world built on instinct, unpredictability doesn't feel neutral. It feels unsafe. Not dangerous necessarily, but unstable, unclear, something they can't fully trust. So your dog adjusts. It becomes more alert, more reactive, or sometimes more withdrawn. Not because it's misbehaving, but because it's trying to understand a pattern that keeps shifting. You might call it behavior, training issues, personality. But underneath all that, your dog is responding to something deeper, the consistency of what you project without realizing it. And here's where it starts to get uncomfortable, because your dog isn't just reacting to your actions, it's reacting to your internal state. The tension you carry, the stress you suppress, the emotions you don't even fully acknowledge. Your dog doesn't miss those. It reads them in ways that bypass language completely. It's strange, right? How something that doesn't speak your language can understand parts of you that people overlook. But that's because it's not listening to your words at all. It's watching what your body reveals when you think no one is paying attention. The small shifts, the pauses, the way your energy changes when something feels off. And slowly, over time, your dog builds a model of you. Not your identity, but your patterns. What you do when you're calm. What you do when you're uncertain. What you do when you're overwhelmed. That model becomes its reality. You are no longer just a person in its life. You are the structure it uses to understand everything around it. So when something unfamiliar happens, your dog doesn't analyze the situation the way you would. It looks at you, not for explanation, but for direction. Your reaction becomes the answer. If you're calm, the situation feels safe. If you're tense, the situation becomes something to question. It's that immediate, that direct. And most people never realize how much influence they have in those moments. They think they're just reacting, just being human. But to the dog, that reaction defines reality. If this is making you pause a little, good, because this is where the relationship starts to shift from something casual into something much more significant. And if you're seeing your dog differently right now, just take a second and stay here with this. Maybe even hit like or subscribe if this is resonating, because there's more beneath this. Because what we've talked about so far is just the surface. The real shift happens when you understand what you actually represent in your dog's world. You are not just a companion. You are not just someone it spends time with. You are the center of its emotional environment, the thing everything else gets measured against. That's why your dog mirrors you so closely, not in a conscious, thoughtful way, but in a biological, automatic way. It adapts to match what you consistently present. So if you're calm, it learns calm. If you're reactive, it learns reactivity. Not because you teach it intentionally, but because you become the blueprint it follows. And this is where people often get it wrong. They try to fix the dog's behavior without ever looking at the source of the signals shaping that behavior in the first place. They focus on commands, corrections, techniques, but ignore the underlying energy that's influencing everything before a command is even given. Because to your dog, your presence speaks louder than anything you say. Before a word leaves your mouth, it already knows how to interpret you. And that's why sometimes, no matter how many techniques you try, things don't change. Because the problem isn't in the method, it's in the message your energy is sending. I mean, think about it honestly. Have you ever felt off, distracted, or tense, and noticed your dog acting differently around you? More alert, more clingy, or maybe even distant? That's not coincidence. That's feedback. Your dog adjusting in real time to something you might not even be fully aware of yet. And here's the part that changes everything. Your dog doesn't need you to be perfect. It doesn't need constant happiness or forced calmness. That's not realistic. What it needs is clarity, a consistent emotional baseline that it can rely on, even when things around it change. Because in its world, consistency equals safety. Not perfection, consistency. That's what builds trust, in a way words never could. And when that trust is there, everything else becomes easier. Communication becomes smoother, behavior becomes more stable, and the bond deepens in a way that feels almost effortless. But when that clarity isn't there, when your signals are mixed or unpredictable, your dog starts trying to figure things out on its own. And that's where confusion begins. So in a way, your dog is always asking one silent question. Not what are you saying, but who are you right now? And whatever your answer is in that moment, that's what it responds to. That's why this relationship feels so different from human ones. There's no pretending, no masking, no explaining your way out of inconsistency. It responds only to what is real. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful, because your dog doesn't interact with your image, it interacts with your actual state. So if you're scattered, it feels it. If you're grounded, it feels that too. There's no filter, no delay, just direct perception. And once you really understand that, you start to realize something else. This isn't just about how your dog sees you, it's about what you're consistently showing the world. Because your dog becomes a reflection, not of who you think you are, but of what you repeatedly project without thinking. And that realization, it's quiet, but it hits deep. Because suddenly, the focus shifts away from controlling your dog and toward understanding yourself. Your reactions, your patterns, your presence, the things you thought were separate from your dog's behavior are actually shaping it every single day. And then it clicks. Your dog doesn't see you as human, it sees you as something more fundamental than that. You are its stability, its emotional reference, the thing that makes sense of everything else when the world feels uncertain. And when you step into that role consciously, when you become more aware of what you project, something changes in the relationship. It becomes calmer, clearer, more connected. Not because you forced it, but because you aligned with how your dog naturally understands the world. And maybe that's the most important realization of all. Your dog isn't asking you to be someone else. It's responding to who you already are, moment by moment. So the real question isn't whether your dog sees you as human. It's, what version of you is it seeing most often? Because whatever that version is, that's the reality your dog is living inside. And once you truly see that, you don't just understand your dog better. You start understanding yourself in a way that's a little harder to ignore, and maybe even harder to forget.